Thank you for joining us today. So we're going to be talking about assessing participation beyond the home. And what we're going to be talking about also has some connections with a research study that's going on with Towson University, and the IRB is 3778. So tonight's objectives really is for you guys to be able to describe the purpose, design, and scope of the ACT Out, and also the ACT Out usability pilot, to apply the manual guided administration procedures to ensure standardized implementation, to summarize the theoretical foundation and evidence-based support of the ACT Out. And with the ACT Out tool, we're going to go through the ACT Out tool, and our goal is for you guys to be able to demonstrate understandings of parts 1 through 3 and the required administration components, so you guys can carry this out with the people that you work with. And then we hope that you will assist with implementation of the pilot workflow. And we'll go through that at the end as well. So the ACT Out was created by Isabella Margot Catton in collaboration with Lena Nygaard and colleagues in Sweden and Switzerland. If you do a lot of research in home and community and home assessments and so forth, you probably have seen their names or some of the research they have done about the ACT Out, and that's where I first learned about it. And then I was able to meet them at the GSA conference in 2024. After meeting them and asking if we could create a version of the ACT Out for the US, we developed a US pilot team. And the pilot team right now is made up of Jenny Womack and Kendra Shank, and then myself. So our study purpose is pretty basic for the first study. The US-based pilot evaluates the usability of the ACT Out assessment in real-world home and community-based occupational therapy practice, with the goal of understanding how OT practitioners currently assess out-of-home activities, and to examine how ACT Out integrates into clinical workflows, and to identify opportunities to improve implementation in private practice and community settings. So we are seeking OT practitioners with greater than 2 years clinical experience who practice in home and community-based settings. We were really hoping that a lot of private practice owners that work in the home and community would utilize this. And it addresses community participation, mobility, or out-of-home engagement. And then, of course, being licensed in the US and fluent in English. We'll talk a little bit more about the pilot study. We adapted this. So really, right now, they're just looking for people to even just completing one of the ACT Outs with one client. Basically, I want to talk a little bit more about the ACT Out. So hopefully you guys can see the value of adding this into our practice. So the ACT Out was developed between 2013 and 2015 to address a gap in assessing participation outside the home. And it was designed using a place-based framework to examine the transactional relationship between the person activity and the environment. They refined it through cognitive interviews with older adults, including individuals living with mild moderate dementia. There is a study that's published in AJOT in 2019. They have, again, other studies across 2020 to 2025. And now we're doing the evaluation study for the usability in home here in the US. This talks a little bit more about the pilot purpose. Again, I've already talked quite a bit about that, so I'm going to kind of breeze over that and talk about more of the ACT Out. So it is a questionnaire, and it's attended, or the manual covers the questionnaire, the target populations, administrative guidance, and everything. And you guys, if you don't already have access to it, we'll make sure you have access to everything you need. And the purpose of the ACT Out is, its whole goal is to capture participation in activities outside the home, to look at the interaction between places and activities, to identify participation restrictions, highlight barriers and facilitators, explore perceived risks and familiarity, and inform clinical reasoning and intervention planning. The manual emphasizes that the ACT-OUT goes beyond listing activities or locations and looks at the transactional relationship between the person, the activity, and the place. As far as clinical benefits, for those of us that are age-friendly therapy practices, it fits very well in the What Matters M. It also fits really well in the mobility section of age-friendly. If you guys aren't familiar with age-friendly healthcare systems, we have some presentations we've done on that. You can look it up, but basically to be an age-friendly therapy practice, you have to follow the 4 M's, and the first M is what matters. And so using the ACT-OUT really allows us to support the occupational profile development and find out what matters to the clients. Helps us to identify strengths and participation gaps, to guide community mobility interventions, to encourage self-reflection, support social inclusion, and highlight contextual influence in occupational performance. Again, if you're just assessing inside the home and even right outside of the home, and you're not assessing their clients' abilities to participate or complete activities in the community, then we're not really assessing if it's the right place. Because if people are lacking social interaction and they have social isolation, that's been found to have a huge impact on people. If they can't get out to their doctor's appointments, if they can't get out to the grocery store. I mean, yeah, we can order that stuff in, but again, we really need to look at activities outside of the home, not just inside the home. As far as the target populations, it was originally developed for older adults with mild to moderate dementia living in the community, but it's now used with a wide variety of individuals. So, older adults with cognitive impairment, post-stroke, acquired brain injury, adults with disabilities, any population experiencing community mobility and participation challenges. We've had people reach out to us if they can use this for when they're working with, adults with developmental disabilities, young adults when they're transitioning out of high school. So there is, the manual really stresses flexibility and who you utilize it with. With the ACT-OUT, it was initially developed for research, but it's equally applicable in clinical practice. So both in occupational therapy, it can be used by other disciplines. The study we're doing is specifically for occupational therapy professionals, but it can be used, within the public health world as well. When you administer it, it's really a conversation type administration. It's not, a test or anything like that. The ACT-OUT is, skip through that. The ACT-OUT is grounded in occupational science, transactional perspective, participation theory. It addresses prior gaps of, activities or locations people used to go to. It looks at places that maybe they used to go, but now they don't go. So the abandonment of places. It looks at, what risks people feel, and we'll kind of dig into these when we're looking at the manual. It takes about 45 to 90 minutes. Really depends on the individual. I mean, you can even complete it less than 45 minutes. You can divide it across sections. I know some people have asked, how do you tie it into your intervention or your evaluation component when you're already doing a variety of things? But again, it's one other tool for your toolbox. So you're doing your initial evaluation and treatment, and then another session, maybe you're evaluating their ability to participate in activities outside the home, and that's when you pull in the ACT-OUT assessment. And you don't have to do it all in one. You could, tie it to the other. Also think about, like, maybe there's something they could be working on, and you could also be doing the act out with them and asking questions for dual task. You know, there's a wide variety of ways that you can incorporate this into your session. And I know we've had other people that want to administer it by OTs, and yes, you can, but for our study, we're focusing on OT professionals. So as far as evidence, so there is, you know, a variety of evidence out there from starting at 2019 all the way up to 2024. And I'm just going to pull out a couple of these studies just because it helps kind of show a little bit of some benefits for why we use it. So this study was really one of the first studies when they're creating it and looking at the development of the questionnaire to evaluate out-of-home participation. And like I mentioned earlier, they started this because they were working with people, or they were using this for people with mild to moderate dementia. And they found out that most dementia assessments focus on what people do inside the home, and the ACT OUT focuses on where people go, what they do, what has changed, and what barriers. So do you guys are you all familiar with, you know, the shrinking world when people have dementia, that, you know, sometimes they experience the shrinking world because they gradually stop going out to places they used to. And then eventually they really don't go out at all. So this is just a really good tool that we can use to help support, you know, independence, social connection, cognitive stimulation, all of that kind of things, and figure out what did they used to do, why aren't they doing it, then how can we get them to be able to do that. This goes further about the development of the questionnaire. It was in 3 phases. First was the construction phase, where they created the list of places people go. Then they had a revision phase where they did cognitive interviews. And then they had an alignment with people with dementia phase. And what they found out was that the place-based format was easy to understand. People naturally told stories about meaningful places. Flexible wording helped, and travel-related places were added back because they were important to identify. And some key takeaways: they found that participation outside the home is deeply meaningful. Loss of familiarity contributes to disengagement. Places and activities are connected. You can't separate them. Tool development is iterative, I can say that word, and requires testing. And the ACT OUT provides a structured way to track participation changes over time. So you complete the ACT OUT, you figure out, you know, really what did they really like to do, what aren't they do, and then how can we help them be able to do that. And then you can do complete the ACT OUT again to show how we're making improvements to get people to participate in activities outside of the home. This was another study that was done in 2021. This study looked at how familiarity with places influences participation outside the home for people living with dementia. And there were 64 participants living with mild to moderate dementia, and they were living in the community. And the researchers really wanted to understand which places people continue to visit, which places they stop visiting, and how familiarity affects continued engagement. And what they found, like we mentioned earlier, as dementia progresses, many individuals experience a shrinking world and they gradually stop going to places. And this study explores whether familiarity with places helps people continue to participate outside the home, as well as to this understanding helps occupational therapists design better community-based interventions. This just goes on the study design. This talks a little bit about the actual results. So they found that familiarity supports participation. So people were more likely to continue visiting places that were well known, frequently visited in the past, and embedded into daily routines, which again, when we're working with older adults and people with dementia and their caregivers, we do talk about routines, continuing to go to places that they're used to going to, and keep it in a regular cadence versus just every once in a while. And that if you continue to go to the familiar places, that helps to reduce anxiety and cognitive load. And then, of course, they found that loss of familiarity contributes to disengagement. So when places feel overwhelming, complex, change, unpredictable, then the participation decreases, which pretty much makes sense, right? They also talked about participation is not just about physical ability. So, some people may assume that they're not going out into the community because of mobility limitations, but it can also be related to other things such as perceived safety, confidence, social comfort, wayfinding abilities. They also found that participation patterns vary by place type. So some places were more likely to be maintained. So again, places that they went on a more regular basis or they had to go to, such as grocery stores, pharmacies, medical appointments. And then the others were more likely to be discontinued, such as social venues, cultural places, and large complex environments. Which again, if you think about social venues, large complex environments, and the amount of people and so forth there, that can be overwhelming, but we also don't want them to lose the social engagement when they're going out. So their clinical implications talked about we need to look at familiarity, not just ability, and support routine-based participation, modify environments to increase predictability. Again, create those routines. Talk about why it's important to continue to go out. I've been working with a client, and he had a stroke and executive functioning impairment, and his daughter's getting married. And so we've been working on getting him out in the community, in the environment, going to places away so that, when he goes out and away to the wedding, that he's a little more comfortable than just kind of doing it, out of the blue, right? So really building up that confidence, ability to navigate use different navigation strategies so that when you're out there, you feel more comfortable. This is just more information about that study. Maintaining familiar environments and routines may slow participation decline, preserve autonomy, support identity, enhance quality of life. How many of you guys that are listening tonight or watching by replay, how many of you guys are making sure that your people with dementia or even just older adults are continuing to get out of the home on a regular basis so that they can preserve all of those different items? If you just want to put yes or no in the chat to kind of see where we're at, but it's a huge component, and sometimes we get so focused on what they can do in the home, we forget on the importance of them getting out in the community. This was another study, and this one actually was looking at people after they've had a stroke. And there were 63 adults in this study, and it was 1 to 4 years post-stroke. And they looked at 4 environmental barriers. They looked at frequency of a visit, familiarity of the place, familiarity of the route, and then perceived distance. And then 4 different patterns came up. So pattern 1, close, familiar, and frequently visited, versus pattern 4, far less familiar and frequently visited. And what they found with the study is that participation is shaped by how frequency, familiarity, and perceived distance combines, not by one factor alone. So these patterns are significantly associated with whether participation was retained or abandoned, transportation access, being accompanied by someone, and severity of disability. And participation is not simply determined by rural versus urban residents or by being a driver. takeaway of this study, they just talked about the fact that clinicians, we need to really consider transportation, social support, environmental familiarity, disability, severity, and meaning of the place. And again, we've already talked about this before, but participation is a systems issue, not just a mobility issue. So I know that was really fast going through some of the research, but you have access to all the different research studies that were out there before as well. So with the ACT Out, there's 3 different parts. So the part 1, and I think it's a little easier once I just pull up the tool and we can walk through it. So I'm going to kind of go through this a little quickly, and then we'll pull up the tool and you'll have access to the PowerPoint and the handouts to come back with it. But basically part 1, it has 4 different domains, and then it asks about different locations in each of the domains, and it asks, do you go there now? Like to say the grocery store. Do you go to the grocery store now? They answer yes or no. If they answered no, then you ask, did you go there in the past? And most likely they're probably going to say yes. And then the next question is, would you like to go again? Okay, so pretty basic, and we look at all the different areas. So this helps us identify their current participation, their past participation, what places have they abandoned going to, and then what places do they desire going to again. And the domains, and these are just examples, not everything is on here, but domain A is consumer, administration, self-care, such as, pharmacy, post office. Domain B is healthcare places, doctor, dentist. Domain C is spiritual, social, cultural activities, family, friends, senior center. Domain D is more recreation, physical activities such as sports, gardening, going out in nature, things like that. Okay, so again, part 1, it's merely you're going through all of these different domains. You're asking them, do you go there now? Do you go to the post office? Yes or no? If they say no, did you go to the post office before? Yes. Would you like to go again? No. And then you move on. That way you know what were abandoned, what ones they would like to re-engage in. Okay. And then part 2 is a deeper dive. So part 2 includes 2 sets of questions. A place with no change anticipated, a place where change occurred. So what I mean by that is when I ask someone if they go to the post office and they say yes, and then I ask, or no, if I ask if they maybe went to, what would be something they might say no. Did you ever go to, did you go to sports events? And maybe they said no, or they say no, and then did you go to it previously? And they say no. There's no change there. Or they go there now and they went there before. The second part is a place where change occurred or is anticipated, such as they're currently not going to the doctor's office, but they used to go to the doctor's office. Okay, so we have 2 sets of questions. They pick one spot in each of those sections. It'll make more sense once I pull up the document. And then there's open-ended questions about each of the places. And with these places, we can ask more than one, or we just focus on the one, but it'll make sense once I pull these up. It's probably kind of confusing going through these, but what we ask them is, why did they pick that place to talk about? What activities occurred there? How often did you go there, or do you go there? How familiar are you? What risk do you perceive about going there? Transportation, does anyone go with you? How far? So we're just doing a deeper dive into what's going on with those places. And then the third part is optional questions. However, I personally feel that they are very valuable parts of the assessment. So I don't know why anyone would leave those out, but those are optional questions about risk tolerance, concerns about embarrassment or stress, satisfaction with community participation and community mobility. And then there's responses on the 4-point Likert scale. Okay, with scoring and interpretation, there's no single total score required. Interpretation depends on project or clinical context. Emphasis is on patterns, not totals. It really allows you just to identify what places they want to go to or like to go to that they would like to go to again. Helps you identify risks that they're, worried about and things like that. Okay, so just 1 second while I stop my screen and I pull up the tools, and then I will come to your questions too. So, let's see here. Oops. Okay, share my screen. And I'll put this in the chat as well for those of you that don't have it. And then I'll put each one of these in here as well. So this is the manual. And we're not going to go through all the manual today, but you'll have access so you can go through the manual and see what we talk about there. But that's in there. And then, oops. And then the assessment. Go through and show you this one. Okay, so part 1. I think that one's pretty basic for all of you guys that are watching. If you can put a yes or a no, if you feel comfortable with the part 1, and I'm going to explain it one more time. But basically all we do is we go down each of these sections and ask them, do you go to a small shop such as convenience store, small business? And they say yes or no. If they say no, did you go there in the past? They say yes. Would you like to go to this place? Yes. Okay. Then if they say no, they could still like to go to this place, really. Okay. And then you just go through all these domains. So I think that one's pretty basic. And these are all the different questions on there. And then we get to part 2. So part 2 is the one that I don't think I probably explained the best when it's on PowerPoint. But basically for part 2, this is where they pick another place, or they pick a place that there was no change with. Okay, so they went to it before and they still go to it now. So maybe they pick the doctor's office. They went to it and now they still go to it. You ask them, why did they choose that activity? Why do you go to that particular place? Can you give an example of an activity you usually do there? So a doctor's office would kind of be silly. Seems like it'd be more beneficial, like maybe if they used to go to the park or something like that. But you go through and answer all these questions. When during the day or year do you go there? How often do you go there? How familiar are you? Picture yourself in that place. What do you have to be careful about or pay extra attention to? Okay, so that is just about one place that they picked that there is no change. And then questions 2 still applies to this one. How did you get there? Did someone go with you? If yes, why does someone go with you? According to you, is it close by, far away? How well do you know the place? So again, looking at their perceived, distance and things like that with that. And then the next one for part 2, now we're asking them on an item where there was a change. So most likely it's going to be they used to go there. Now they no longer go there. Asking them, why do you choose to talk about that place? And then again, you're going to run through the set of questions under 1, the set of questions under 2. And then the part 3 optional questions. So this is where, you can choose to talk about community participation in general or specific places. If they want to do specific place, type about that specific place. But this is where you find out when you go or went out, how concerned are you or were you about getting lost or falling or being stressed or getting into an embarrassing situation? So again, when we ask them these questions, if they're very concerned about falling, wouldn't this be a good thing that we could address during therapy so they can get out of their home and go see their family or friends or, whatever they want to do and get them to a point where they're unconcerned. And then same thing, the community participation, community mobility, again, a nice way to look at how did they rate themselves on being unsatisfied up to very satisfied with that. Okay. How do you guys feel about part 2? Do you feel comfortable with part 2? You can just put a yes or no for those of you that are on part 2. I kind of skipped over and didn't ask you those sections. Still okay with that? Okay, great. Yeah, I think it really is a easy thing that you can add to it. And then the last one, part 3. Anyone have any questions on part 3? Pull up this again. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense with the assessment. And as far as licensing and use, so it's licensed under the Creative Commons. So it's free to share, must provide attribution, non-commercial use, no I can't say that word today. Devivorate, I can't say it. Well, let's skip it. I'm blaming my braces. Structure cannot be modified or redistributed. Core conceptual assumptions. So the manual consistently emphasizes that participation outside the home is foundational to occupational identity. Familiarity reduces perceived risk. Shrinking participation may precede functional decline. Participation is shaped by environment, technology, and contextual factors, and the tool is structured but conversational, and interpretation should preserve narrative meaning. So all we are asking you guys to do is there's an onboarding questionnaire that we have for people to complete. And then all we would like you guys to do is just complete this with one person as soon as possible, because we actually present about it in Amsterdam in a month. After you complete it with one person, we have a usability survey that we would like you to click. That's, again, really simple. And then optional is participate in tentative focus group. So again, there is a focus group that's meeting this week for people that have already been utilizing it. We'll have a new focus group or another focus group if there's more people that start to use it. I really think again, this is the very first study. So if there's more interest with other people, being part of the focus group and on expanding its use, and that would be awesome. We'd really appreciate that. And really, again, assessments, you only need to complete one. Clients don't need to sign anything because we're not collecting any data from the science or from the actual assessment with their names on it. Do I need to provide a report at any particular intervention? No. And then these are just if you have questions, but I'm just putting, if you guys have questions, you can just go ahead and ask them or put them in the chat if you guys have questions in the chat. But you can just unmute yourself and ask them as well. Anyone have questions? Does anyone feel like this is something that would be beneficial in your current practice? And be honest, because it doesn't fit everyone's practice, but with what you guys are doing, do you feel this could be something that might be beneficial in your practice? Are any of you guys assessing activities outside of the home right now, or people's ability to participate in their community? Yeah, for sure, Cheryl, that would be great. And then are you a program director for an OT or OTA program? It's even, again, not just helping to spread the word about this tool and just talking about why we want to look at things outside of the home as well would be awesome to share with students. Anyone have other questions on this? Or want to share their thoughts or how they would incorporate it into their practice? You guys are a quiet group tonight. No questions or dumb questions? Um, no, so as far as the specific population, when they first created it, it was created for, mild dementia and so forth, but it really can be utilized with, any population. It doesn't have to be anything specific. Like for my practice and, and a lot of us that work in the home and community, we're utilizing this with like an older adult population. But we even, in a grant proposal, we're looking at, utilizing this with even people that before they get to like 65, just to start talking about if they already are limiting their activities outside of the home, what to think about, and so forth. But again, it's great for the older adult populations when you're doing a home safety assessment. Definitely recommend you utilize this as well, because if you are only looking at inside the home, you're truly not making the best decision on if someone can age in the right place. As far as, it depends on the clients and how much, right? So, 45 minutes to an hour. You can move it along pretty quickly. Some people like to talk a little bit more, especially if they're missing some of those places. Another question we also get that I didn't mention today is sometimes when you're working with someone with dementia, it might be more the caregiver that's helping to answer this. But it's also important for a caregiver to understand that we want to continue to get people outside of their home and out, so we can limit the shrinking environment, right, as much as possible. Great questions. Any other questions that you guys have? So really the next steps, just make sure, and if you don't have it, we'll be sending out a email to everyone that attended with the, if you haven't already completed it, there's just an onboarding questionnaire that's really quick. And then we'll send out the manual and the assessment so people can administer it with one client. And then once you administer it, just all you have to do is complete the usability survey and that's it. So it's pretty quick and easy for those of you guys that want to participate. But if you guys can also just help spread the word and so forth, the more we can try to get this around in the US and help do some more research and get it utilized, the better. Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll sign off. You're welcome. Thank you guys for coming. Again, reach out if you have any other questions about anything, and you should be getting the email and information tomorrow if you don't already have it. So you guys have a great day, and hopefully you guys can do at least one assessment, because it'd be great to talk about it more or to talk about more people utilizing it when we're presenting over at the international conference. So appreciate it. Thanks, guys.